everybody, welcome to today's TREA How to Workshop. My name is Giada and this session is on creating and participating in community gardens. For those without a backyard, with Gosse Van Oosten from White Oaks United Church Community Garden, and other guests, Vanessa Kinsley from the City of London and Sam Dow from the London Community Resource Centre. The discussion includes a mix of both private and public gardens use. And first of all, thank you so much for joining us online through Zoom as our venue. We ask that you keep your mic muted so that we avoid background noise as we begin. And there is also a chat where you're able to write questions. Questions will be taken at the end of the workshop. Just so you know, we're recording this presentation, and if you cannot be with us the whole time, you can still watch it again or share it later with a friend when the recording is going to be shared on YouTube. We will send you a link with the video. For the organization of this workshop, we want to thank the Ontario Trillium Foundation for supporting all these different workshops. Now a little bit about TREA, the Thames Region Ecological Association, who's hosting this workshop. This workshop is actually part of a series of how-to workshops this year to action on climate change. TREA's main goal is to educate members and the community to protect the environment, stay informed, and take personal action. Its vision is a sustainable community. TREA is a local non-profit registered charity, and it has been active in the community since 1986, so quite a bit of time, on important environmental issues. TREA is known for a number of activities such as special events, workshops, programming to engage community, and encouraging public policy. Topics over time have included air quality, pesticides, plastics, PCBs, anti-idling, green consumerism, energy conservation and renewables, and reducing overall our environmental footprint. And TREA is currently promoting waste reduction, cycling, climate issues, and trees composting demonstration site, pollinator garden, and supports as well community efforts on urban agriculture. TREA is also offering several workshops with a how-to theme this year on topics that are influencing our current interests and behaviors given the COVID-19 pandemic. We hope that this session allows citizens to take action on climate change on a personal level. To find out more, please visit our website or Facebook page. To begin, I would like to introduce Gosse Van Oosten, our lead speaker. Gosse is a board member of the White Oaks Community Garden Committee. Besides having a plot in the community garden he will be talking about, Gosse also grows plants on the balcony of his apartment and at his summer trailer in Lenton County. For many years, Gosse has been a member and supporter of TREA and was a former chair and board member. Our other guests include Vanessa Kinsley from the City of London, her role as supervisor of the city's community gardens and neighborhood support, and Sam Dow, who's the operations manager of the London Community Resource Centre. So when it comes to community gardens, first of all, we have to know where are they. It is really exciting to be able to discuss this concept, the concept of community gardening from a variety of perspectives. Not everybody is lucky enough to own their own private garden, therefore community gardens offer more possibility to grow your own plants using shared plots on either private or public lands. Here, as you can see in the slide, there's a map of many of the community gardens in London. You can visit the website of the Friends of Urban Agriculture in London to view further and get to know more details. So this map actually outlines a number of private and city public garden sites across the city. Plots vary in size and rental fees and are generally open between May 1st and November 30th. Before we with the actual presentation, I would like to just ask a couple of general questions in regard to gardening. So the first one, you could actually answer it by clicking on the raise hand option, which should be on the bottom right of your screen, is have you had a garden in the past decade? So you can answer either by raising your hand like this or with the reactions emoji on the bottom right corner. Okay. Great. It seems that a couple of people do. Great. And in that case, is this garden in your backyard, in a community garden, or elsewhere, for example? And then you can actually type the answer in the chat on the right. So we can see that some people do community garden and home garden, for example. Again, home garden, backyard garden, where people that work in the have also plot in the Westview community garden. Great. So it seems like a lot of us are involved and have the opportunity to actually grow their own plant in their own garden, which might take different shapes. And we're going to talk actually about the different ways you can do your gardening. Okay. So now let's start with why garden. Let's start with the many benefits of gardening. Gardening is a rewarding activity, and the practice of sharing gardens fosters community engagement and green living. Understanding the work and patience that goes into food production and tasting the difference in homegrown fruits and vegetables is both humbling and gratifying. So now we can have the opportunity to hear more about the benefits of gardening directly from Gosse.
There are a number of reasons why people should be interested in gardening. Most importantly is that gardens support food security. A number of people that grow vegetables in this garden do not do it just as a hobby. They get most of their nutritional needs from the food that they're able to grow in their garden, and often grow enough food that they have enough for themselves and they can share with others. They do this sometimes because a lack of grocery stores or a market nearby, living in what we call a food desert. A strong benefit of gardening is that you can also often get two crops out of one plot. At the end of October, I plant my garlic, and in early July, mature and I pull it up, and then the plot is ready for a second planting of lettuce or spinach, and this is something that I've learned from other gardeners. And secondly, gardening is good for your mental health and well-being. As you work in the garden, you reconnect with nature. It gives you a calming effect and slows you down. Your pace, the stress melts away. Gardening provides physical activity, and you do not have to join a gym or pay gym membership fees to get this exercise. Fees for the garden plot will be cheaper than the gym as well. Having a garden gives you pride and satisfaction in growing food, which is fulfilling work. Gardening helps you to reconnect with nature. People often experience nutritional deficit disorder because they do not spend much time outdoors or in nature. Connecting with nature is important, especially when you live in big cities, maybe on the 13th floor of an apartment building like I am, where we don't have access to a garden. Gardens give you fresh food that is available at a reasonable price. Diverse foods you might not find in grocery stores. Food that's organic because no pesticides or herbicides were used to grow it. Gardens help preserve diverse seed stocks. Seed saving is a lost art that seems to be making its way back to popularity with gardeners. Seeds are largely inexpensive to buy, making them an easy and economical way to grow your garden by gathering them through seed catalogs, shops, seed savers, and from other gardeners. From picking the right plants to decorating your garden shed, gardens create beauty and give new life to otherwise unused plots of land. Beautiful gardens appeal to our senses. The colors and immense diversity of design combinations, fragrance, flavors, sounds from birds and insects attracted to the plants, and the variety of textures increase our appreciation of plants. Lastly, gardening helps save money and reduces hidden fossil fuel costs through energy conservation and recovery of materials from composting and yard waste. We hear about how far our food has to travel by truck, plane, or boat from many countries, and this is not sustainable. A better way is to grow food close to home, and with gardening, you cannot get closer to home than that. If you do not have a garden in your own backyard, join a community garden. In reality, you do not save a lot of money because it may be more expensive to grow your own food compared to buying it at a grocery store. So these are my reasons for gardening.
Thank you, Goss. So there are different ways you can garden. For example, you can have a vertical garden or build raised beds to have a box garden. Goss, please tell us more about the different types of gardens that people can grow with the space that they have available.
Thank you. There are a variety of ways you can garden and produce food at home or in your backyard. Even in your patio, you can grow plants with sufficient sun, which is very important. And then you can plant them in containers or boxes, whatever you happen to have. Another type of gardening in small plots, or if you have a small backyard that does not have a lot of sun, find a sunny spot and then you can plant strawberries or lettuces or herbs on your fencing or hanging from poles. This type of gardening requires little watering. And thirdly, community-supported agriculture, described shortly, allows in some areas farms that urbanites can visit and help with food production and also get a share of produce. Foraging for wild plants is another method of gathering food, and some organizations actually help people to recognize the different plants that they can gather up. For example, Forage City London is a popular group. Locally, there are many places where people have planted fruit trees and give permissions for others to pick their fruit. Raised bed gardens are also popular. If you have space, a raised bed is a good way to start a sizable garden, especially if you have poor soil conditions. They allow you to grow above the ground and control the temperature, texture, and makeup of your soil with more ease. Raised bed gardens are built on top of the native soil or grass or even asphalt in some cases and are usually contained in a structure, though some are simply free-formed mounds of soil. You can buy a ready-made raised bed or build an Instabed from a kit or a DIY, a custom bed to your specification. Wood, from cedar planks to railway ties, is most popular, but you can also create a raised bed out of bricks, stones, cinder blocks, or straw bales.
Thank you so much, Gus. And other examples include, for example, balcony gardening and container gardening. So please, Gus, if you could tell us more about also those two kind of garden.
Yes, container gardening. We're talking about different kinds of containers here, not just the options for small spaces like balconies, patios, or rooftops. A container garden can be a standalone garden or an accent to a larger garden. It can include a collection of pots and saucers, window and deck rail boxes, and other planters that you can easily move around.
Thank you so much. And it's also important to understand how urban agriculture and the concept of CSA, community supported agriculture, ties in with local gardens. Urban agriculture is the practice of growing, processing, sharing, and distributing food within the city. Food loss and recovery is another aspect which includes composting. Through community supported agriculture, subscribers receive either a weekly or bi weekly box of produce directly from participating farms. So today we have Diane from TREA who is actually gonna tell us a little more about urban agriculture and CSA. Thank you, Diane.
Hi. First of all, individuals and communities around the world are showing a marked increase in connecting more directly with and participating in food production activities and raising their own food within city limits. On the one hand, we have the now well-developed movement of the community gardens, which not only provides the space for people to grow food, but also the context for bringing people together to grow the community. So a driving force in London was the implementation of the food systems chapter of the London Plan, which is our official plan, to establish a dynamic London approach to urban agriculture. And this is now called the London Urban Agriculture Strategy. This strategy is explained as not only individuals growing food for their own use, but also establishing commercial and entrepreneurial activities for which there is a sales component. And you can find this document on the city's website. So London has many steps to support a strong food system. This includes the Middlesex London Food Policy Council, and there are several food-related plans and policies in London and strategies such as the pollinator protection policy, which is in the official plan, and naturalization planning. So these all complement the city's urban agriculture strategy. And with community shared agriculture, this is a participatory process engaged in when subscribers contribute and receive either a weekly or bi-weekly box of organic produce as part of a share of the year's harvest, directly grown by local participating farms. Growers and consumers share the risks and benefits of the food production. So these are called CSAs, and they generally focus on the production of high quality food for a local community, often using organic or biodynamic farming methods and a shared risk membership marketing structure. The core design includes developing a cohesive consumer group that's willing to fund the whole season's budget in order to get quality food. The system has many variations as to how the budget might be supported by consumers and how the producers will receive the food. Three common CSA characteristics are an emphasis on community and or local produce, shares or subscriptions sold prior to the season, and weekly deliveries to the members and subscribers. The functioning of a CSA also relies on four practical arrangements. First of all, for farmers to know the needs of a community, for consumers to have the opportunity to express to farmers what their needs and financial limitations are, the commitments between farmers and consumers to be consciously established, and for farmers needs to be recognized. Items that you can find in season for fruits and vegetables can vary to have dried foods, eggs, milk, meat. There's quite a large, diverse arrangement of items in the box. So a local example of a CSA here has 100 members selling vegetables at the Western Fair Market all year round, and then also at the Wildflower Farmers Market in St. Thomas during growing seasons.
Thank you so much, Diane. That was really informing. And so now we're going to focus on the specific aspects of the benefits of gardening, multicultural sharing. Shared garden spaces cultivate stronger relationships between neighbors, they instill pride and ownership in communities, and inspire people to learn new, rewarding skills from each other. Gosse, please tell us more about the diversity of your gardening community.
White Oaks United Church Community Garden is a very diverse neighborhood with people from around the world. For instance, we have people from Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. Because we come from such differing countries, we all have different gardening practices and cultures, so we learn from each other. We grow different kinds of vegetables, for example, and some of them I don't even recognize. Gardens are a great way to form connections in your neighborhood. Amazing relationships can develop. People maintain their gardening friendships for many years. Shared garden spaces, garden resources, and community workshops provide opportunities to make new connections, share and cultivate diverse horticultural and culinary knowledge, and enjoy nutritious local produce straight from your garden. The people who garden here, a lot of them come from the nearby neighborhood. They see us gardening and they ask, how do we participate? And then they come on board. So it's a win-win. We help each other. We look after each other. We also learn from each other.
Thank you so much, Gosse. And when we had the opportunity to visit the White Oaks Church Community Garden, we also got to know Mapare Maratzde, who had the garden plot along with her husband for the past 10 years and is one of the regular gardeners of the White Oaks Church Community Garden. The White Oaks Church contributed to the setup of this community garden by sharing the land that they had available. Gosse, how did this come about?
Well, approximately 12 years ago, the White Oaks United Church decided that they wanted to do something with their land and also outreach to the community. The vacant land they had available next to the building was just in grass, and they made it into a community garden. At that time, the city was looking after both private and public city gardens and looked after the wait list and plot rentals. At one point, the city decided to focus on city properties solely, and so this garden now is looked after the individuals who garden here.
Gosse, couldn't you tell us more about what is actually involved with the maintenance of your garden?
Yes, we have a garden committee, and we raise funds every year by the rental of our garden plots. $40 is the standard, and sometimes we have to ask a little more, especially when it's a hot, dry summer and we use more water. We pay the church for their water, but we don't pay any rent. It's all free. We have to replace the water hoses about every other year, sometimes every year. and everyone shares the responsibility for maintaining the garden, composting, and cutting grass. Concerning the process of how to get your own private plots, information is provided on the website by the City of London. The City of London Community Gardens guidelines outline each gardener's responsibility if you use a city garden plot. In the specific case of the White Oaks United Church, we ask those interested in renting a plot their name, phone number, and email, and then we can contact them once a plot is available to confirm they are still interested. Presently, we have a waiting list.
Thank you so much. And now, Goss, if you can also tell us a little more about your own garden plot and what you find that grows well in it.
Thank you. This is the perennial part of my garden. I planted some rhubarb here last year, and these are some wild daisies that come up every year. But the insects and the pollinators need something too, right? My sunflowers, I grew them 1 year, 4 years ago, and since then they've come up from seeds every year. And there's different kinds of herbs. And I've got a water barrel here. So because of COVID, every odd number day I can come to my garden because I'm in plot number 1. And here's a box which my friend grows. I didn't choose what to plant, it's her idea. There's a lot of ripe tomatoes here. So this is a plot where last November I planted garlic, and it's now all been harvested. There's also strawberries here, and so another one of my perennials. I come and make sure I get whatever is ready to pick, and if yes, I have to pick. More tomatoes are here. These are the little pear-shaped yellow tomatoes. They're not early, so there's nothing ready to pick right now. But there's lots of flowers and lots of green ones. And here around, I have planted some onions, which I planted alongside, and 1 or 2 are ready to eat. And here's some lettuce, which I planted in the spring, and my carrots, which I've been eating from for a couple of weeks. And some peas here are still growing. It's past their time, but I've planted some more for the fall. And here's a couple of zucchini plants. They're the yellow zucchinis. And here I have Swiss chard and kale. And this is what I use for my soil amendments. It's a 2-in-1 mix, garden soil plus compost. And I also use sheep manure. So we have some herbal beans here. These are an interesting variety, but they taste just like the normal beans. They also grow in pods, which are edible. You don't have to shell them. And here's some more lettuce that came up from seed. It planted itself, so I'm just let it grow. Oh, and I'll tell you, this is an eggplant right here. That's a tour of my garden.
Great, thank you so much, Goss. Now hear about Vanessa's experience in managing the city's community garden program. The difference here from the volunteers at Goss's location is that she coordinates the various gardens on city property across London. However, the city is moving toward having community gardens in neighborhoods and having the neighborhoods more so look after them. This is a brand new concept. This will move them more to that of a private garden approach. And Vanessa receives many inquiries asking how to start a community garden from community members, as well as who to participate with the ones she manages.
Hi, I'm Vanessa Kinsley, and I oversee the Community Gardens program with the City of London. So today we're at the Ann Street Garden, and it's July 2020. The Ann Street Garden's probably been around for about 15 years now, so it's one of the older gardens in the city, and it's very well established. There are 27 garden plots in this garden, as well as 2 raised plot garden beds, which are for accessibility, so people in wheelchairs or who have mobility issues can use those raised beds. And it's a very well managed garden right downtown along the Thames Valley Parkway, right on the river. It's quite a beautiful garden, as you can see in the background. People plant lots of different kinds of vegetables, but also plant pollinators and other species as well that really add to the diversity within the garden, which is great. So aside from the Ann Street Garden, we also have 17 other gardens on municipal land as part of the Community Gardens program. 16 of them are allotment style gardens, so it's individual plots rented by individuals in London, and the cost ranges from $15 to $40 depending on income. So depending on what your income is, it costs a different amount. And that's the amount you pay when you register. We also have 2 gardens that are neighborhood managed and school managed. So we have one garden that's run by Emily Park Public School that is in Norwest Optimist Park. It's quite a small garden and is totally overseen by the school. So the principal and parents in the community all take care of that garden. And then we also have the West Lions, which is also called the Petersville Community Garden, which is new this year in 2020 and is run by the community. So it's neighborhood managed, all of the allotments. So depending on if people want a plot, an individual plot for their family or want to communally garden, it is run by that neighborhood and not by the city. We just have one contact through that garden and we keep in touch with them, but overall they're able to kind of control how they manage the garden on a day-to-day basis. The rest of the gardens, as I mentioned, are allotment style garden. That means that each individual would get a plot. So you can kind of see behind me where these stakes are laid out, like from that stake to that stake, in a rectangular shape would be one garden plot at this particular garden. And people pay for that individual spot. And they can garden with family member, friends, individually, and they have that for the whole season, which runs from May 1st till November 30th. So it's a good long season, and then they're able to actually rebook the exact same plot the next year to allow for planting of perennial species and as well as fall harvest plants like garlic and onions and those kind of things. So people really appreciate that because they're able to put in work and then reap boards the next spring as well. Our gardens also across the city have different types of water sources, water supply. So this garden in particular has water tanks, which are large water cisterns, one at the far end over there, way behind me. And they are filled by city staff on a regular basis whenever they're almost empty. And people are able to fill up their watering cans and use those for nice fresh water on the garden. Other gardens that we have taps, and so they are just water lines run from the road for people to use, and then there are hoses attached to most of those. Within the gardens, we have 464 garden plots, so there's potentially 464, possibly way more individual gardeners working in the gardens at any given time during the year. We are pretty much fully booked every single year, so it's a very, very popular program, and it's also a very diverse program. We have a lot of people from different backgrounds and who speak different languages, growing some really cool things depending on the neighborhood and which gardens you go to. Some gardens have a lot of African species planted, which is really cool, and some gardens have a lot of Asian species planted, also really cool. So people get the opportunity to learn from each other and to learn about plants that they never normally see in a grocery store, so that's a really cool thing that I've learned since I've been part of this program.
Nice to hear how she seems to echo a lot of the great things about gardening that Gosse already mentioned, and how this program is so popular and it's really competitive, almost quite competitive to get a plot and be able to cultivate and grow your own plants, and even get some tricks and some tips from other gardeners who might be able to tell you more about plants that you've never heard of. So if we're able to hear some more about the whole experience of community gardens, which is a rewarding activity. Okay, great. Should be able to move on.
Community gardens are intended for personal use and growing of food for your family or yourself. We don't allow sales of any produce within community gardens. However, we do encourage and, of course, allow donation and trading of vegetables within your garden. So quite often gardeners will definitely trade with each other. So if you have a lot of tomatoes and your neighbor has a lot of cucumbers, you can trade those amongst each other. And then we also have the opportunities for sharing boxes. So several of the community gardens have built-in sharing boxes on their bulletin boards. There isn't one here yet, but we plan to install one at any street in the future. And that's an opportunity to just put extra things, not even just produce. It could be seeds, it could be pots, it could be tools in a space where members of the public or other gardeners can help themselves to that. Really good chance for gardeners to give back to the community and to donate to people who don't have what they have. So it's a great way to get rid of your extra stuff in any given year, and we find that that's a very successful way to do that. Additionally, there are programs like the Grow Row program through the food bank that allow gardeners to specifically set out a part of their garden, a row or two or three, to donate to the food bank. So they plant those rows intending to donate it later in the season and do that at the end of the season, and they can register for that on the food bank.
Great to hear that nothing gets wasted, and there's always opportunity to, if you harvest more than you can actually consume, it doesn't end up in the trash. It can still be used for other people. They can still get access to it, and it's truly a sustainable local food system. So moving on, we should be able to hear one final segment from Vanessa.
Here's a better close-up view of our raised garden beds, and as you can see, they are a very efficient and nice way to garden, especially for people like I mentioned with mobility issues. So you're able to wheel up underneath, and then you can plant really intensively in these spots and get quite a good harvest. So we also at some garden have things like pollinator garden. They can also take part in growing plants for pollinators and watching that flourish as well, and all working together. There's also an opportunity within community gardens, which a lot of people would do at home as well, but if you live in an apartment or condo and don't have room, you can compost within your community garden plot. So there are several gardeners here and at many of the other community gardens who choose to have a composter within their own plot for their garden waste and food waste while they're at the garden, and then they can keep those year after year as long as they're within the same plot and get nice fresh compost every year to use in their garden. So each year we take in new applications for new community gardens, just like the West Lions Petersville garden, which started up this year. And the process to getting a new community garden on municipal land is quite similar to what you would do on private land, because really it's a step-by-step process that looks at first gathering people in the neighborhood and getting people on board in your community who all want to start the garden together, and then moving forward with things like soil testing and looking for water source and making sure that the land is not being planned for anything else in the future. So although the municipal gardens maybe are a little more accessible as far as working with city staff to put them in, it's also a much more complicated process in general to put gardens in on public land, because there is a much broader community engagement portion to getting a new community garden on city land. Whereas an advantage of getting a garden on private land is that quite often it's just a matter of the community coming together and making that decision and not needing to necessarily go to a huge number of people past that initial group. But then again, the actual step-by-step to getting the garden on the ground is quite similar. So in the past, we have also been approached on a regular basis by private landowners or community groups on how to put gardens on private property, and we're quite happy to help with that process as well. We have the ability to support that and to help out groups with that kind of thing. And if anybody had any questions on that, you can email communitygardens@london.ca, and I can certainly provide more information and input.
Fantastic. It was really great to hear more information on the actual process that you want to, start in order to get a plot and how it works, and also the different aspects that characterize the Ann Street Garden, which we can see now with some of the pictures that we were able to take yesterday. The weather was a little ambiguous, but we were able to see the pollinator garden, the composting bins, and then moving on, we can also see water tank and some of the plots in this lovely garden with a very interesting position near the Thames River. And obviously, Vanessa shared some of the information, some of the contacts that you might want to reach out to in case you are interested and you want to pursue this avenue and get involved in the community gardening initiatives. So there are some other pictures that we have of the Ann Street. Perfect. That was great. So now we are able to have our other guest speaker, Sam, to talk more about Westview Baptist Church Community Garden. So Sam, thank you so much for being here, and I'll hand you the mic so you can actually talk more about the community garden and the different initiatives that you've been involved in. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so Westview Community Garden organization, London Community Resource Center, has we previously managed all the community gardens in the city until the city decided to take those over in the end of 2016. So the Westview Garden was a pretty early established garden. I believe it's been there since around 2004. Since the city took over all the gardens that are on public land, this one is obviously on privately owned land on the church's property, which is why they aren't managing this one. So the church, they allow us to use the land without any rental fee or anything like that. They just enjoy having the garden there. but we do pay for a portion of the water each season. So there used to be a water line at the garden, which no longer works properly. So there's a water tank that's at the garden where gardeners are able to fill up their watering cans and be able to water their gardens that way. We have approximately 30 plots in the garden. Obviously, one of them is taken up by a water tank, and then one of them is for our sprouts community garden plot, which you can see in the center picture there. The picture on the left, you can see that some little smaller garden beds, which is where we plant food that we would use in some of our cooking workshops and things like that. So there's approximately 27 plots that are available to rent to members of the community. And I believe we have 24, 25 that were rented this year. So we have a few plots available that hopefully will get rented next year. Yeah, so the garden is completely maintained by LCRC staff and volunteers, so myself and volunteers that I'm able to have with me for the season. In more recent years, we're trying to have the gardeners also assist with making it a little more self-sustaining. So I have a couple gardeners that do an amount of maintenance around there. So one of our gardeners, he'll fill up the water tank if he notices it's getting low. I've had a gardener that's offered to help turn soil in additional plots in exchange for not being able to afford their payment on their plot, which is perfectly reasonable. So yeah, the water comes from the church, but we along the large shed there, we have a series of rain barrels that is able to collect an amount of rain from just natural collection, which we hope to improve on in upcoming years, where we're able to make that a little more self-sustaining.
Great, Sam. Thank you so much for providing us more insight on how the Westview Baptist Church Community Garden actually works. And again, I seem to hear some resemblance with the way the gardens where Gosse has his own plot works as well. So I think we are ready to wrap up. So we've gained a lot of ideas now on how to become involved with community gardens. In summary, we hope you agree. Community gardens are just a great asset to cities since gardeners can access healthy, organic, and quality food, be physically active, and create new meaningful relationships with like-minded people. Gardens can be designed in many shapes and sizes, but overall, the success and sustainability of community gardens rely on community support and involvement. When people work collaboratively to maintain, organize, and coordinate community gardens, the benefits are many for both the participants and the neighborhood where a garden did not exist before. Thank you to our speakers for your comments on this topic, and we hope viewers are inspired to take action. Q&A session, so we can get further details and information from you. And for the participants of this workshop, if you want, you can actually type your question in the chat, and then we're going to answer questions that are going to appear. So both Sam and Gosse can actually give their own insight. Great. So the first question is, what grows best in a community garden? So speaking from your own personal experience, what do you think grows best in a community garden? Gosse, maybe you want to start. Sam, I think you can both provide information about it.
Say that pretty much anything really grows well in the community garden. I know I see a lot of people each year, they're growing tomatoes. This year, I wasn't able to plant as much stuff because obviously starting up our garden, we had to make sure we had a lot of safety measures in place with the COVID-19 situation that's going on. So I only could plant a limited amount of stuff, but I was able to plant some potatoes, which are actually probably the easiest thing I've ever planted because it's just putting a potato that's got some roots growing out of it into the ground. So it's really whatever people want and have the accessibility in terms of being able to prepare that in their gardens.
Thank you so much. I don't know if maybe Gosse wants to add something or...
Yes, I would say that a garden should have at least 6 to 8 hours of daily sunlight. Shouldn't be near tree shade, for example. That wouldn't work too well. If the soil is really compacted and hard so it won't contain moisture, you have to add a number of emollients such as compost and manure and maybe peat moss or coco coir. And some people also use sand. So if you have that kind of soil, you need to amend the soil. Other than that, pretty much everything will grow. If it's a plant that requires a long growing season, you can buy transplants, and these are available through garden supplies. So most of my peppers and tomatoes, because it takes 60 to 75 days to come to fruit and harvest, I start with plants that are bought in small boxes. If you have the room in your house, you can do the same thing. Just plant them in the sunny window. So you have the plants ready to start off in the garden. And anything that you want, depending on the growing season. Of course, some tropical things won't grow, but most everything will grow in this part of Ontario.
Great, that's really encouraging to hear, and it partially answers some of the other questions that were asked. One was about how do others deal with poor soil quality. So maybe if you want to tell a little more about what you do depending on the type of soil. You mentioned the importance of sun and other elements, maybe adding compost if it's necessary. So if you want to perhaps expand on that, that would be great.
Yeah, we had quite a heavy clay soil. So it's very hard to grow anything because it's either gets so wet that the water's pooling on top, or it's so dry that it starts to crack and, big holes in the ground and cracks in the ground. So clay needs to be amended, and that's basically how I mentioned we did it. And you can also start a garden in a box on if you don't want to dig up the soil, you can just lay down the cardboard, add some wood chips or straw or shredded paper, then add your boxes and build up from there with your compost and manure and some garden mix. And then every year you just add more compost to enrich the soil because not your plants.
Great, thank you so much. I think we have time for a couple of other questions. And we were asked, do other older gardens ever rest their community garden for a year? So maybe this could be a question for Sam, speaking from experience.
As far as I know, there usually isn't a year off for community gardens. I believe when Vanessa mentioned in her video, they had something like 460 plots in the city, and they're completely booked up every year. So if a garden were to take a year off, that's 30 or more people that wouldn't have a garden plot that year without another garden to go to. So each year, I'd say probably about 90% of our gardeners will be back the following year, and a lot of them will have planted stuff all that will remain there for the winter that's then ready to continue growing in the spring.
Most of our gardeners do return, but we only have 17 plots, so we get to know everybody pretty well. And as a community, we know who they tell us we can't do it, or my health won't permit me to do the heavy gardening work. So then we have a plot available, and sometimes we actually allow this where a gardener with a large family will have two plots adjacent to each other. And so our plots are like 10 feet wide by 40 feet long. It's a pretty good size. Or I should say 24 feet long.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So time is wrapping up. So I'm sorry to say that we won't be able to answer other questions today, but perhaps, getting in contact with our panelists, we will be able to answer some of the questions that I'm sure are still of key importance. So before we end our workshop, I would like to mention once again that there are more workshops to come in the month of July, and sooner we'll also have some other sessions in August and September. So once again, if you're interested, you can get more information on our website and on our Facebook page, as well as getting in contact with us at our email info@TREA.ca. And well, thank you so much for participating. It was quite the adventurous session, but it was really interesting and enlightening, and I really appreciate the contribution that each guest speaker had to offer. It was really great to hear different perspectives and actually how they merged together to support this great practice that is community gardening, and that can take many shapes and involve people of all kinds of backgrounds. So that is really encouraging.